Okay, I'm going to try to give you a quick down low here on the procedure I use for attacking targets from the wheel using the Mavericks. So we're approaching the target area now. My parameters are going to be 15,000 feet, 350 at 12 nautical miles from the target. What I basically do is once I've found my targets as I ingress, I put my targeting pod in the area mode, as you can see, and I place it in the center of the target area. You can see in the bottom right of the HUD, the distance from the target right now is 18 miles. If you look at the top of the HUD, you'll see two things. The number on the left is a relative bearing to the target, left of the gun cross, and the line to the right is pointing to the target. So that's the direction you'd turn, and you'd make a 20-degree turn to be nose on with the target. So the relative bearing to the left of the gun cross, the target locator line, and the slant range distance below the bottom right in the bottom right of the HUD is all I'm going to use to attack these targets, along with, of course, the targeting pod page and the weapon page, which is at the bottom left. So I've got the targeting pod now in the area mode, IR area. You can see on the weapon page, we're going to be moving out of the gimbal limits, which is okay. We're not going to worry about that until we're actually rolled in on the target. So I'm set up here at 15,000 feet roughly at 12 DME, and I'm shooting for about 350 knots, just the parameters that I've decided to use for this mission. So I'm getting set up. You can see if I set a relative bearing of about 90 degrees, that's going to put the target exactly to my right side, right off my right wing. I'll set up a bank angle here of about 12 degrees eventually, and that will keep me on target. You can see down here the situational awareness dot on the targeting pod also indicates the target is right to the right of me. Notice on the weapon page, of course, the targeting cross there for the Maverick is outside the gimbal limits. So also look at the brackets here. You can see the weapon is not in the expanded or narrow field of view. I'm going to want to put that into the narrow field of view to ensure I get a good lock. I'm going to demonstrate later what happens, what can happen if you do not have it into the narrow field of view. Okay, so just demonstrating here. I'm doing a narrative here after I've actually recorded this. So just demonstrating the on the weapon page that the tracking gates are there when you're in the normal field of view, and then once, of course, you go to the expand or the narrow field of view, they go away. Okay, so 12 miles in the HUD, bottom right, 12 miles or 13 miles to the target. Up by the gun cross, the relative bearing is 100, or the bearing to the target is 100 degrees, and it's off to my right. So as you can see on the targeting pod page, I'm simply scanning for targets at this point. Being in the wheel allots me plenty of time to do that, as I'm not closing on the target. And what I'm doing here is I'm looking for the radar on the AAA site. So if I can get rid of that radar, I'll have better success, and I can actually get a little bit closer to the target because they won't be as accurate. The idea is to get in and out before I even get fired upon. And I believe I've got the radar site located. So if you were running into the target straight at it from 15 miles, so you'd have no time to do this. You'd be lucky to get it. You'd be off target, back out to try it again. It would take forever. So what I'm going to do is pause the video here in a second and explain how I'm actually going to roll into the target. So I know this video is more about just the procedure of making sure you get a good lock and good handoff with the Maverick, but I'll just give you some information on the technique that I use to roll in. So as I said, I'm using this bearing indicator, the target reference line, and the distance down here in the HUD. I'm not going to use the HSD, and I'm really not using the weapon page to guide. It's just to verify. I'm not going to be slewing the targeting pod very much, only minor adjustments to get over the target. That's about it. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to roll about 90 degrees of bank, maybe a little more, and let the flight path marker float down to about 10 degrees pitch down at military power. That's going to help me increase speed, or at least maintain it while I pull G, around 4G or so, just depending on how tight you want to get into the target. And I'm going to be watching this bearing number here reduce 80, 70, 60, all the way until 0. At the same time, what I'm doing is I'm trying to guide this flight path marker here so that it's below or just below where this target reference line up by the gun cross is pointing, so that I don't have to push the nose over. I could just roll out, pull up slightly, and the flight path marker will be exactly onto the target. That's the idea. Once the flight path marker is on the target, I look down into my targeting pod, make sure it's the cross is over the target, move it slightly if need be. The flight path marker should still be centered over the target. It's certainly going to be within the gimbal limits or of the handoff limits of the Maverick. I TMS forward long to lock the target. All I do is look at the weapon page and verify that I've got a handoff and the cross is solid. Once I'm in range, I fire. Now to come off target, I go military power, 45 degrees of bank to the left, back into the wheel, and I'm going to be pitching up to 10 degrees. And I'm going to be turning until this reference, and this is my technique, is 140 degrees away from the target. What that does is it reduces my closure and it starts me egressing away from the threat, and it's basically a 45 degree entry back into the wheel. So there's only 45 degrees roughly of change to get back into the wheel, or 50 degrees. So the nice thing about that also is it allows me to look back over my shoulder and view the target or the threat area, just in case maybe there was a missile launched or something like that. So it's kind of a compromise between quickly getting into the wheel and also being able to see the threats and so forth. And then I just re-enter the wheel, set up a 90 degree bearing, and do it all over again. And what I do in the video here is I actually watch the missiles hit, but you don't necessarily have to. You could then just go after another target and pull right back in. I mean, literally, if you don't watch the missile impact, you can get all 6 missiles off in 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and be on your way out. And you have only used up maybe 180 degrees of the wheel. The beauty of it again is you can orbit the target area, search for your targets, and when you're ready to go in, you can execute. So let's go ahead and watch it. Okay, so what I've done is I've slowed down the clip by about half speed so I can explain this as I roll in. The rest of the attacks I'll do full speed. Okay, so as we said earlier, we're going to pull in, and I just want you to watch the bearing up by the cross, the target locator line, as well as the flight path marker. Okay, here's the roll in. I'm just going to let my flight path marker drift down to about 10 degrees, but really I'm just trying to keep it below where that target reference line is pointing. Only about a 3G pull getting in here. I could do more if I wanted to. You can see we're counting down. Also, look at the weapon page. See how the cross is coming down on the weapon page of the Maverick? Right towards the center, because that's where we're pulling to. Notice the gates are not up. Don't need them. Alright, 10 degrees. There's my target. I'm going to roll out. Place the flight path marker roughly on the target, or the target box. We're 12 miles still. This is a Gulf, by the way. Looking down here at my targeting pod page, I'm going to now TMS forward. Notice my weapon page. The cross is dead center. I don't need the gates. I still also have this line reference down here anyway. Okay, so on the targeting pod page, I make any finite changes. TMS forward, lock it up. Now look over here on the weapon page. You'll see the handoff. You see that we've got a solid cross up in the HUD, or down here we're in range, and we're going to rifle and then start our move off the target. Okay, we're coming off target here, so I'm no more than 5G. 45 degrees, roughly a bank. It just depends on how close you get to the target. I started my egress there, or safe escape maneuver, at 9 miles for AAA, so not too much rush. Anyhow, we're pulling back to 140 degrees relative bearing, and again, that's about 45 off the target or so. But look down here at the HSD page. You can see that now I'm basically beaming the target, but I am going to be dragging away, and that's going to keep me away from the threats and increasing the distance to the threat, as well as getting me into the circle fairly quickly, and I can also look over my shoulders and look for any inbound missiles and such. Okay, so up here our relative bearing, roughly 140. Targets to the right. Looking down here at our slant range, we've still got 9 miles. And we're looking for about 10 or 11 before we roll back into the wheel. Let's wait for impact. Okay, while we're waiting for the missile to hit the target, once we get out to the range that we're looking for here, bottom right of the HUD, about 11 miles, just start a gentle roll back into the wheel. You can see my altitude's back at 15,000 and speed around 350. Now these are just the parameters that I've set for this mission based on threat, terrain, etc. If it's a higher threat, you may need to be higher up, you may need to be further away, but the wheel will still work. Okay, so waiting for target impact, and once we get that, we'll move on to a couple more attacks at full speed. Okay, there's a shack, so now we're going to just start looking for more targets. Once we find them, we can roll in. This is nice if you're looking for maybe specific launchers, or you're looking for specific armor, a specific tank, or artillery. A lot of times we just go in, we see ground targets on the radar, we just pick 6 and launch and try to get out there in one pass, and you end up with a bunch of trucks. And the armor's left behind. So, alright, so we're looking for the next target, and I think we're going to pick this one up here, and let's just watch the roll in full speed. I got a little high here because I was fooling around with the targeting pod page, but anyhow, just centering the flight path marker over the box, lock the target, look at the weapon page. We've got handoff, solid cross, rifle. I think this one I go for 2 targets, get a little brave here. Lock, look at the weapon page, cross pretty much centered, rifle, and off target. Just barely broke my my hard deck there. What I generally do is set the hard deck plus 500. So when I hear the altitude, if I've got my finger on the pickle button, I've still got time to pick one, stay above the hard deck. Saw the recovery there, heading back out to the wheel, and we'll do it all over again. Okay, fast forward here, and we'll take a look at our impact. So there's a shack. Now I think the next one I'm going to ripple fire a couple of Mavericks. If the opportunity is there and you've got targets close enough, then you can ripple fire. So there was 2 shacks. Getting back into the wheel here about 14 miles, and we're going to look for some more targets here, or at least look for some targets that are close enough that I can ripple fire. I'm just going to let the video play here rather than fast forward, just to show you how much time you've got in the wheel to find those targets. And now there's 2 close targets. Remember, I've gone out a little bit further here to give me time for the setup, which is nice. So your wheel could be anywhere from, say, 10 to 15 miles, and just adjust the distance depending on what you're trying to do here. So let's see if we can get both of these missiles launched on the target in a ripple fire without getting below 10,000 or hard deck and without getting too close to the target. Also, you want to have a distance radius wise from the target to help you make sure if you're having trouble to come out and not keep pressing towards the target if you have problems. And that could be done with 10,000 is a good one. I think it just gets you about 7 miles from the target. So rolling in here, and got my first target. They're close enough together that azimuth is not going to be an issue. There's a lock, handoff, step to the next station, lock, handoff, step to the next station. We're still outside the max range of the missiles, so we're just going to make sure that I kind of go between the two targets before I launch.
Altitude.
And there we go. So about 9 miles, 10,000 feet is roughly, or you know, at the dive to keep the flight path marker over the cross, about 12 degrees. Once you go below your hard deck, you're going to be right around 9 miles or so, it looks like. That also depends how far out when you start down. I started down a little bit earlier because I was at, I think, 13 miles as opposed to 11. But anyhow, I'll fast forward here and we'll see the impact. Okay, now we're going to look at what happens if you have the Maverick in the, or what could happen if you have the Maverick in the normal field of view. Why it happens, I don't know. Maybe ask somebody that is in the books all the time, really studies up on this stuff. I honestly don't know. But I do know that more times than not, if I don't have this in the narrow field of view, it causes me problems. So look down at the weapon page. You can see we're in the normal field of view, rolling in on the target. Flight path marker is over the target. We're going to go to the targeting pod page, same parameters. There's the lock, and there's the flashing cross. And we close, and we close, and we close, and it just never stops. So off target, and let's try it again with a narrow field of view. Alright, back in the wheel here, and one of our last targets. I think there's one more truck or one more gun out there. If you look over on the weapon page, you can see that we're back to the narrow field of view. 9 miles in the wheel. Let's roll in, and let's see what happens once we're back to the narrow field of view. I'm not looking at the weapon page or the targeting pod. I'm just using the reference in the HUD, but you can see down here on the weapon page how it's drawing the cross right down to the center.
Altitude. Altitude.
And looks like as I see the missiles launch, I forgot to take the ripple off, so one of those targets are going to miss, or one of those missiles are going to miss. It looks like I also got a little close to the AAA there. That one gun, or one or two guns back there firing at me. As I roll in the last time with a Golf to take out the control tower, just a touch here on techniques. This is simply a technique. It's my personal preference, and the reason I do it is because it's very accurate. As long as I follow the procedures and get a good lock, good handoff, and launch in range, I have zero issues when I do it this way.
Altitude.
Other people have different techniques. I'm sure some people can find some flaws in what we do here. Again, I didn't cover too much about threat assessment or target recon, stuff like that. It was more about just the the technique that I use from the wheel. The wheel may also not, maybe not always be appropriate, but when you can use it, it allows you plenty of time to get in, find the targets from a safe distance, and using this roll-in technique, it certainly allows you to be very accurate and consistent. And you can see what happens also if you don't put it in the narrow field of view. Again, I just don't know why. Maybe a little bit of research in the book will find out. I have rolled in on target before in the wide field of view and I've had no problems. But when I roll in with the narrow field of view, there's never a problem. So that's my technique, and if you like it, use it, modify it to fit you, whatever you need to do. Hope the video helps. Thank you.